So let's bring in retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. Good to have you with us today, General Kellogg. I want to start by playing this from Antony Blinken about where they see the moves from Putin materializing right now. Watch this.
Everything that we're seeing, including what you've described in the last 24, 48 hours, is part of a scenario that is already in play, of creating false provocations, of then having to respond to those provocations, and then ultimately committing new aggression against Ukraine.
Yeah, so the Russians have pulled out, evacuated all the men and, the women and children from the Donbass region, which they have a rebel hold on, essentially, which is a big chunk of Ukraine. They have said that Ukraine is about to attack that area. How do you assess where we are now, General?
Yeah, look, thanks, Martha. Thanks for having me. Look, I think we're heading to a gunfight. What I mean by that, between Ukraine and Russia, it's pretty clear to me with the array of forces that Putin has around Ukraine. He's got over 70% of his army located around Ukraine right now, and he's brought forces in from the Far East as well. Look, we're talking past each other, and I think the time for diplomacy is pretty well gone. Here's what I mean. We keep talking about NATO, NATO, NATO. Putin knows that. Putin has said repeatedly he has no intention of engaging NATO. He knows it's a suicidal event if he does so. In fact, he knows it's the end of Russia if he does that. So he's not going to get anywhere close to NATO. He doesn't really care about NATO right now because NATO has already said Ukraine is not part of NATO. Article 5, an attack on one, an attack on all, it doesn't apply to NATO. So he knows he's got a free card to go forward. President Biden gave him one when he said, well, a limited incursion might be okay. President Biden also said no U.S. troops are going to go into Ukraine. So this has left Ukraine wide open. And I think diplomacy's gone, and I think you're heading down the path that Putin is going to go in a military invasion. Here's the problem I've got, Martha. It's easy to get into a fight. It's really hard to get out of one. So the next question ought to be in everybody's mind, senior decision makers, okay, how do you stop this fight? How do you end it in a way that's acceptable to the West as well as for Russia, because Russia is going to be the occupier?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I heard General Keane earlier saying that he doesn't believe that President Zelensky of Ukraine should be going to this Munich security conference in the coming days. Right. He said it is probably not a good idea, given Russia's posture, for him to be out of the country. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. General Keane was right. He leaves the country, he's not coming back in. If they start an invasion in the next 2 days, there's no way he's getting back into Ukraine unless it's on foot in the middle of the night. Because they'll control all of the airspace. And this is not a small fight. Russia's the largest country in Europe, and also the European and Asia landmass. Ukraine's the second largest country in Europe. These are two large countries potentially involved in conflict, not part of NATO. So NATO's going to have to sit on the sidelines and watch this thing go, because there's no recourse for them to do anything about it. That's what I mean about talking past each other. There has been ways we probably could have worked this, but both sides were intransigent in their positions, and nobody worked towards the middle ground. That's my frustration, because diplomacy is sometimes hard, and you don't get everything you want. You may go to an 80% solution on each side, but both sides wanted to have 100%. And they wanted to go their way. And I think because of that and the hardcore positions both sides have taken, I think you're heading to a fight.
Well, we know from everything that Vladimir Putin has said, really since about 2007, that he does not believe in the security architecture of the post-Cold War period. He doesn't buy it. He doesn't buy the United States as the lead superpower. He wants to rearrange that architecture, and that is the goal that he's working towards. So we'll see where this goes. General Kellogg, thank you very much. Great to have you with us today, sir.